Hey guys, this is Ryan coming back to you with another checkmating pattern. Okay, this particular pattern is checkmate without the queen. Alright, and with any checkmating pattern, you are trying to cut off your opponent's king's escape squares and then deliver a final check which he cannot escape from. That is the name of the game. Okay, and with that, let's get into it. Alright, so let's look at this position. White to move and deliver checkmate. Okay. Now I know it seems a little hard to envision, alright, but there are couple of particular moves that White can make and force Black to respond in the way that he wants him to. Right. So some of the ideas with checkmating is cutting off your opponent from being able to maneuver his piece away from the piece giving the check. So it's kind of like a setup, right? So the first couple of maneuvers might just be not necessarily the checkmate, obviously, but the setup, right? So here, if you look, this rook on A6 is cutting all the way to where the pawn on F6 is sitting. Of course, there's a pawn on C6, but if you can envision that pawn moved, all right, this king is looking a little bit uncomfortable being on E5. Okay, so if we can maneuver this pawn out of the way from C6, all right, and then somehow give check again to the king, he's going to be in trouble. He's going to not have very many places to go because he can't move up the board to D4 or F4 because our king is covering those squares. He can't move to F5 or pawn on G4 is covering that square. And he is looking a little bit cramped. So, like I said, with this particular pattern, we're using a couple different kind of motifs together, and one is obviously restriction. You're restricting the king, and then you're going to make a clearance sacrifice. I'll just tell you straight out. And what this does is it clears, as the name implies, it clears a piece, but it also may what they call distract a piece or pull a piece away from the protection of a particular square or piece. So with that in mind, let's make the first maneuver. So, like I was saying before, if we could get this pawn to move from C6 to E5, we're going to have this king in a little bit of trouble. And if we were actually able to move this pawn, you see on F2 to F4, and give check to the king, he wouldn't really have anywhere to go. The problem is if you just move the knight out of the way to like E2 and try and play F4 right away, your opponent has the option of taking en passant, and you don't have checkmate anymore. So, is there any other maneuver that you guys can see that gives check and will distract or divert or clear that E-pawn from the protection of the F4 square, and indirectly, obviously, because of its ability to take en passant. And yeah, there's this knight maneuver to D3, check. All right, and why can't the king just move back to D6 or to E6? Well, if the rook's cutting off those rank, then your opponent has to take with that pawn. So like I said, sometimes it's kind of working backwards. It's like I'd love to be able to give check with that pawn on f4. Is there any way we can get this pawn on e4 out of the way? And then after that, you look at the position and you say, yeah, there's a possibility to get that pawn out of the way. Well, if I get the pawn out of the way, f4 doesn't work because he can just run away. So, is there any way that I can possibly restrict his king first? Is there any maneuvers? Yeah. Play rook takes on d5. Check. Because now this maneuver, because the knight is also attacking that square on d5, black must take with the c-pawn. And now that the c-pawn is moved to the d5 square, the 6th rank, as you can see from the rook on a6, is cut off from the king. And now, let's look back to our little maneuver before where we want to give check with the king, with the pawn. All right, now let's look. Knight to d3 check. King cannot go anywhere. He must take with the pawn. And now that he has taken with the pawn, you have distracted his defender away from the defense. You have cleared it away from the defense of the king. So after this, as you can see, this is forcing the king cannot make any other move but the move you want him to make. And these are very powerful ideas to study because when you catch your opponent in these patterns, there's nothing they can do. And being able to see them is very powerful. All right. So, there it is. Pawn to f4, checkmate. I hope you guys got something from that. All right. I'll be back soon with another video.